Go ahead and start recording. All right, everybody. Hi, I'm Scott Nicholson with the Judy Nicholson Kidney Cancer Foundation, and today we're here with another kidney cancer conversation. And today, Hannah Manella, she's a dietitian and clinical exercise physiologist in Chicago, Illinois. She's joining us today to have a conversation with us about cancer prevention strategies. So we're very excited to have her here with us. I'm going to go ahead and turn the screen over to her. Let's see here. Stop my share. You should be able to share your screen now, Hannah.
Yeah. Let's get this back up. Hopefully this goes smoothly. All right. So hopefully these slides end up working right away. But thank you, Scott, for the introduction. Again, my name is Hannah. I'm an oncology dietitian out of Chicago. And since I do have the background in both nutrition and physical activity, kind of the whole idea of survivorship is something that really resonates strongly with me, just because we know the impact of nutrition and physical activity on cancer prevention, as well as decreased risk of recurrence. So today I'm going to be going through the recommendations for prevention purposes. And what I will say up front is, in the world of kidney cancer, the recommendations are the same across the board. Okay, so regardless of the type of cancer, the survivorship guidelines are the same. For someone with kidney cancer, depending if you do end up requiring dialysis or something like that down the road, then your nutrition recommendations will primarily be managed by, say, the dietitian in the dialysis center. But at the end of the day, these recommendations are still good things to try to adapt, even if you are on dialysis. Okay, so these really are recommendations that are across the board, regardless of cancer type. Okay. All right, so let's dive in. Hopefully this works for me. Okay, here we go. So these recommendations are developed by, where these recommendations are coming from. I'm trying to move I have a little thing in the middle of my screen right now, and it's kind of getting in the way. Okay, let's see if I can go back for a second. There we go. Okay, so the prevention recommendations that I'll be reviewing today do come from the American Institute of Cancer Research, and specifically the World Cancer Research Fund. So there is a publication, the last most updated one was released in 2018, that looks at the bulk of the evidence on nutrition and cancer research, or even physical activity in cancer research and weight in cancer research. So it looks to see what preventable or what lifestyle behaviors are associated with cancer risk. So it's our largest evidence base, strongest supported. It is backed by the American Cancer Society and a lot of other organizations as well too. So that's where the recommendations are coming from today. You can even access this report online as well too, if you just go to the World Cancer Research Fund, and you can pull up these PDFs, okay? So this is a nice visual of what I'm going to be reviewing today. Of course, I'm going to be going into more detail on each specific topic, but there are, for the most part, 10 recommended lifestyle behaviors for cancer prevention. All right. And so this goes on when I'm talking about cancer prevention, it's, either prevention of a primary cancer or prevention of a secondary or a recurrence as well too. So I'll go through each of these specific 10 recommendations, except I'm not going to be spending much time on breastfeeding your baby or the ones that aren't specifically nutrition or physical activity are related. All right, so the first one is the largest evidence base at this time, and the first recommendation is maintaining a healthy weight. Because 12 cancers are linked specifically to body weight and primarily to central adiposity. So if a person tends to, carry weight in their midsection, they're definitely a person that really needs to at least aim to adjust for these nutrition and physical activity recommendations, aim to meet those. Just because weight loss has been associated with decreasing cancer risk. But what I will say, there are a lot of people that end up just carrying weight differently, right? And we understand that there's individuals that tend to carry more weight than others, and that's just natural, and that's their body. And so I don't want people to become discouraged, if they naturally are heavier set, because research has also found that by adhering to these nutrition and physical activity recommendations, regardless of weight loss, are beneficial. Okay, so I want to just start by that. If you don't necessarily notice a weight loss, just by following these nutrition and physical activity recommendations will set you up for a number of beneficial outcomes. Okay. So when we're talking about weight loss, let's at least just focus on starting positive behaviors. We're just going to have to start somewhere, right? So let's just focus on the good behaviors and then not stress too much about the weight. Number two, the second recommendation from this report is physical activity. So I'm not going to spend the majority of this presentation talking about physical activity, but I am going to spend a couple slides right here just talking about the benefit. We know that physical activity is a key lifestyle behavior for cancer prevention. We know that is associated with decreasing the risk of, I think it's 7 types of cancers on the very next slide. I will go to the specific cancers that are associated with physical activity. But we do know physical activity is also associated with decreasing the risk of a number of other diseases, right? We know it is associated with decreasing the risk of diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, osteoporosis. So we know physical activity is so much more than just helping people lose weight. We know that it has so many other beneficial roles in our lives. And the weekly goal for physical activity, okay? I don't want it to be too overwhelming, and I'll explain to you how we can view this a little easier, okay? Because it can be kind of overwhelming at first. The weekly goal for physical activity to decrease your risk of cancer is 150 minutes a week, okay? So that ends up coming out to 30 minutes, 5 days a week. And it is at a moderate intensity is what they recommend. Okay, I'll explain intensities on a few slides so you guys can put this into context. Like, what does this really look like? Do you have to go to the gym and run at high intensities to get the benefit? Or do you have to participate like in yoga classes? Say maybe your joints don't necessarily support that. So it can be done in a lot of different ways. But really the takeaway for physical activity is to limit sedentary time, to be up, to be moving more during the day. I like to think that just by being a little more up and moving and just doing little things throughout the day is moving more. And so just limiting the amount of time that you're sitting all at one time. All right. And at the end of the day, any activity is better than nothing. So we do want to really focus on that. Just being physically active is beneficial regardless of how much you can do at one time. So here we go. So yes, 7 types of cancer. I was right. So a recent report was released last fall that did update the physical activity recommendations for cancer prevention. And they actually found that by participating in 150 minutes a week or 30 minutes, 5 days a week of physical activity is associated with decreased risk of 7 types of cancer. And as you can see, kidney cancer is on this slide. Okay. So physical activity is an independent risk factor for kidney cancer. So by being more physically active can decrease your risk. When I'm talking about physical activity intensity, what am I talking about? So per the guidelines, 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity physical activity is recommended for disease prevention. Okay, and what does that look like? Intensity is not an across the board type of thing. Okay, it is very independent on the person. It's very dependent on your medical history, on your physical activity history. So many other things are impacted by physical activity intensity. Okay, this chart here kind of gives you an idea of different types of activities that traditionally fall within each of these intensity categories. However, it is not the same for everyone. Okay, so we're going to start on the left with light intensity physical activity. Traditionally, light household chores, something like fishing, sitting at the desk, or just leisurely walking are associated with light physical activity. But what I like to view as a better indicator of where an intensity is for someone is this talk test right up here at the top, okay, right underneath each of these categories. When you're doing a light intensity activity, you're moving, you can easily talk, you can easily carry a conversation, you can even sing a song, okay, because it is not strenuous enough in order for you to start impacting your ability to talk. Okay, so free conversation, no issues. If you're just lightly washing dishes, you can hold a conversation, then that's a light intensity activity. A moderate intensity activity is something that you can still hold a conversation, but it's short. It's a much shorter conversation. You can't sing a song. It's broken up a little bit more. So what I like to think in a comparison for this, so let me put it into my personal perspective. My husband and I, when we go on runs together, he likes to talk while we're running and he likes to hold conversation. He asks me questions, and to him, running is a moderate intensity activity. For me, running is a vigorous intensity activity. So it's difficult to speak more than a sentence. I can get 1 or 2 words out at a time. I cannot hold a conversation. It's really difficult for me. So the same exact activity at the same exact speed, for him, it's moderate. For me, it's vigorous. So that's why this table is relative. And so when we're talking about physical activity intensities, it really is person dependent. You can evaluate intensity based on heart rate. You can evaluate it based on a lot of different measures. But the one that I hold strongest one I think is the easiest to follow is this talk test. Okay. So moderate intensity activity, you can hold a conversation. It's going to be shorter sentences, but you can have a conversation. Versus vigorous, this is when you can only get a few words out at a time, or you actually can't even talk during it. That's a vigorous intensity. So when we're talking about engaging 150 minutes a week of a moderate intensity activity, this is going to look different for everyone. So maybe for you, it's just going on a walk. Or maybe for you, it's taking the stairs a little more regularly, or biking, or something like that. That would be your moderate intensity activity. But say if you've been exercising for a long time and all those activities are really easy for you and you can sing a song while doing them, you need to take it up to a next intensity. And then maybe for you, it's something a little more difficult like jogging or running. Okay, so that's how we view this physical activity intensity and what to do when you're trying to increase your physical activity level. The end of the day, it's about finding activities that are practical and that you enjoy. So we know that people that like the activity are going to be more likely to do it. I know right now it's a little more difficult with COVID, right? That our gyms or our pools or some different forms of physical activity that we might have been doing beforehand aren't necessarily available. So I encourage you to get creative with your physical activity, because yes, we are inside more. Yes, it's a little more inconvenient to be physically active, but it's important. And we can't overlook this in the whole prevention in our prevention measures that we're taking, just because physical activity is such an essential component to decreasing risk of recurrence. So, and increasing strength after treatment. So we do know that cancer treatments, you can lose muscle mass, it impacts your strength, it makes you more fatigued. There's a lot of side effects of cancer treatment that make physical activity difficult. So we have to start slow. We have to start somewhere. Otherwise, it's going to be so much more difficult once COVID's done and our restrictions are lifted to get going at that time. So now is the time, and just finding anything that you enjoy and anything that is practical is recommended. All right, so prevention recommendation number 3. So this is, as I was talking at the beginning, plant-based eating is something that is recommended overall when we're looking at diet patterns for the most part. But ideally, it's mainly focusing on eating a well-rounded diet that's high in phytochemicals and high in fiber. And I'll go into those a little more in a few slides. And the foods that are listed here on this main slide are our foods that are associated with phytochemicals and are high in fiber. And as you can see, they are plant-based foods, okay? But what I'm going to say, and I want to make this pretty clear up front, let's see if I can get to the next slide, is that plant-based does not mean it has to be vegetarian or vegan, okay? So a lot of people hear plant-based and they automatically assume they have to adhere to a vegan diet, and that's simply not the case. But if you already are following a vegetarian or vegan diet and you're comfortably following it and you like it and it's working well for you, absolutely keep going. I do know a lot of people that after they hear this whole plant-based recommendation, they jump to a vegan diet and they might not be able to maintain it. It might not be something they find enjoyable. So then that's okay. Let's liberalize it a little bit and let's find a way to make it work with your eating behaviors. But for a lot of people, the vegetarian or vegan diet does work and they like it. But if you're not that kind of person, don't stress as though you have to jump to that extreme right now. Plant-based does not mean vegetarian or vegan at the end of the day. It simply means eating more plant foods, okay? More fruits, more vegetables, more whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, and lentils, okay? So this is what the bulk of your diet should be consisting of, is these plant-based foods. And I'm going to show you how to implement that on these next few slides here. So when we're planning our meals, we're planning our diet for the week, we want to look at color, we want to look at fiber, phytochemicals, and then healthy fats. These are kind of like our nice 4 little key characteristics that we want to try to include when we're planning our meals. So what are phytochemicals? So I've been talking about it for these past 2 slides and I've been emphasizing phytochemicals. So what are they? They're essentially antioxidants, or when you've heard the term antioxidant, those are phytochemicals. They kind of go hand in hand. And they're these beneficial compounds naturally found in plant foods. So plant foods is what I want to emphasize. And they're associated with fending off cancer and other diseases. So they're getting rid of those free radicals in our bodies. And so in order to optimize your phytochemicals, or your cancer fighters is also what I like to call them when I'm talking to my patients, our phytochemicals are our cancer fighters. So we want to eat fruits and vegetables from each color group in order to try to optimize our phytochemicals. Okay, so because each color on the color wheel is associated with a different phytochemical. So they typically are associated with the color of a food. So that's why it comes back to what we learned when we were in grade school, right? Eating the rainbow. And it's so important in order to optimize your phytochemicals. Say you're a pickier eater, you don't like a ton of vegetables or something like that, then let's look at your fruits with a similar color profile in order to try to get that color. So say you don't really like purple vegetables, so you don't really like beets, or you don't really like eggplant, then that's okay. Let's go to berries then. That can be a really nice alternative to try to get more of that purple color and that antioxidant you're getting. You don't have to eat the whole rainbow every single day, but over the course of the week, or over the course of 2 weeks, you do want to try to hit each color in the rainbow. And white also counts. So like cauliflower, definitely counts as a certain phytochemical. So don't feel as though if you are eating like vegetables that are white, something like cauliflower or jicama, they do have their own individual antioxidant as well too. And then at the end of the day, we want to try to take the opportunity to get as many of these phytochemicals in our diet as possible, because these are our cancer fighters. So we don't want to miss an opportunity to get something like this in. So I typically like to say, aim to eat a fruit or a vegetable at every meal. So every time you're eating, where's your fruit? Where's your vegetable? Where's your cancer fighter on your plate? That's what I want to look at, rather than focusing too much on having to follow a vegan diet. No, let's take a look at our diet right now. Look at it, see, is there an opportunity for me to add one of these cancer fighting foods to my diet? All right, and then I talked about fiber. So fiber shouldn't be a surprise to most people. Most people know what fiber is, but at the end of the day, it's a type of carbohydrate that our body can't digest. It ends up going through our GI tract untouched because we can't break down that really tight complex of the fiber. So because it travels through our body untouched, it has so many different roles in our body and so many different positive roles in our body. And this is one I feel like the color and the phytochemicals and the antioxidants are pretty easy for people to remember to do. The fiber is one that's harder to remember. But at the end of the day, if you're eating more fruits and vegetables, you're going to be eating more fiber, and it's going to be a win-win. So really, when we're looking at the benefits of fiber, so as I mentioned, if you're eating more fiber foods, you're eating more fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and beans. You're eating more plant-based foods. It also helps promote satiety. So if you're looking to lose weight, by eating more fiber, it's going to keep you full longer because it's not digested by our bodies. And so it's going to sit in our stomach a little bit longer. It's going to keep you full for longer. It's going to help regulate your bowel movements. So again, if you're also looking to lose a little bit of weight, you're going to have better, it's going to be by having more regular bowel movements. It also helps promote weight loss. It delays absorption and mediates gut hormones. So it helps have a better balance of certain hormones in our body, like insulin, estrogen, all those other things. It really helps have a more appropriate balance of those in our bodies. And then it also helps ferment and feed our gut bacteria. So that healthy gut bacteria, it really helps make it work in a better way. So when we're looking at fiber, if we're looking at a number, a lot of people aren't necessarily going to count their fiber. I know I don't count my fiber in the day, but really the goal intakes is anywhere from like 21 to 38 grams of fiber a day. I would say most people in the American diet are falling short of this. So probably I think like 75% of Americans aren't getting enough fiber in the day. So it's always a good goal just to try to get more fiber. But I don't want you to go from 0 to 60. I want you to slowly increase the fiber in your diet. So maybe like one additional fiber food a day, maybe 2. Otherwise, too much fiber addition to your diet can really cause some negative GI distress, whether it's constipation or diarrhea or bloating. It can make people feel pretty crummy. And then there's 2 different types of fiber. So you'll hear soluble and insoluble. So on the next slide, I'll explain what the differences are between the 2. So we have soluble fiber, or I like to view it as it soaks, soluble soaks, okay? So this is the type of fiber that becomes sticky or gel-like when it comes in contact with water. So think of oatmeal, right? So if we add water or milk or water to oats, it's going to end up solidifying. It's going to become a little gel-like. It's going to become sticky. So it soaks up the water. So what this does in your GI tract, it actually helps slow your transit time. So it helps bulk up your stool. It firms your bowel movements because it helps bring water and it holds water into your stool. So then your stool is going to move through a little more slowly. It's going to be more form, a little easier to control. So soluble fiber specifically is really helpful for anyone that say has some diarrhea following their cancer treatments. So if you do struggle with like a lot of diarrhea or just inconsistent stools or a lot of urgency, it's probably a good idea to focus a little more on soluble fiber when you are choosing your fiber foods. So in this chart here are our soluble fiber foods. Again, they're typically a little softer and they soak up water. So that's kind of the way to view these types of foods. But if you do find that, just eating these foods isn't usually enough and you need a supplement, I would first and foremost recommend Metamucil because it is a soluble fiber that actually helps with both constipation and diarrhea. It actually works really well on both, but it can be really helpful for people that struggle with diarrhea. Otherwise, Benefiber can be a nice option, or even a banana, it's like a banana powder called Nano Flakes. Those can be really helpful supplements if you're struggling with diarrhea or loose stools. Insoluble fiber, on the other hand, this is kind of our scratchier fiber. So think of celery, for example. If you throw celery in a bowl of water, what happens? It actually gets crunchier, right? It holds onto the water. It keeps its shape. That is a type of fiber that is insoluble, okay? So it gets really crunchy and it doesn't absorb the water, actually gets stronger in the presence. And this helps food pass pretty quickly through the GI tract and it promotes bowel movement. So insoluble fiber can be really helpful for people that actually struggle with constipation. So if you tend to be a little backed up, sometimes people after cancer treatment might be on more pain medications or things like that, and they have higher risk of constipation. So insoluble fiber would really be something helpful to try to incorporate more into your diet. As you can see, they're typically more of those scratchy foods is how you kind of view this insoluble fiber, like seeds, raw vegetables, dried fruit, flaxseed. And then like the skins on fruits and vegetables are typically insoluble fibers. And if you're looking for a insoluble fiber supplement, that would be like flaxseed or wheat bran. Wheat bran is actually been found to be the most effective insoluble fiber supplement. All right. Okay, so going back to plant-based eating. So we're just kind of rounding the corner, okay? So as I mentioned, plant-based doesn't necessarily mean vegetarian or vegan. So then what do you do when you're coming to animal protein? So you do want to keep eating animal proteins and you don't know what to focus on. I'll be explaining this more again later on in the presentation, but it's always really nice to bring it up right away. So per cancer prevention recommendations are really one of the few things that we actually recommend to avoid. There aren't a lot of foods that I recommend you have to avoid, but one thing is trying to avoid processed meats, because processed meats like bacon, bologna, hot dogs, salami, prosciutto, those types of processed meats are pretty strongly associated with increased risk of colorectal cancer. So we do know that with a cancer history, there's always increased risk of cancer recurrence or secondary cancers. We do want to encourage avoiding any foods that are associated with a cancer. So processed meats is associated with colorectal cancer. So we do want to try to cut that out of your diet as much as possible. We ideally want to choose like fish or poultry over red meat. So more chicken, turkey, fish, or even like shrimp. Those are all great options versus red meat. So we do know that there's a moderate association with intakes of red meat or high intakes of red meat and increased risk of colorectal cancer, as well as some other types of cancers we're starting to learn more about as well too. So if you choose to eat red meat, say you really like, so red meat would be beef, pork, or lamb, and you really want, say, a hamburger, you really want a steak, what we recommend is limiting your red meat to less than 18 ounces a week. And what does that actually end up looking like? About 6 ounces is about the size of the palm of your hand. Okay, so it's about a small deck of cards. And I'll, again, review this in a few slides as well, too. But no more than 3 servings that size a week. So that ends up actually being a pretty large restriction for most people that do regularly eat red meat. So that's one thing I want to keep in mind. If you do choose to eat red meat, we do have to decrease the quantity and the frequency. And then ideally, if you're choosing animal proteins, we want to use our low-fat cooking method. So trying to avoid frying or sauteing and do more grilling, broiling, or more of those dry heat methods. What I would say is if you are cooking red meat in a dry heat method like grilling, I would like you to put some aluminum foil down so it doesn't end up charring the meat. That specific charring or blackening of the meat is actually what is associated with increased risk when it comes to red meat. So I do want to make sure you don't get that red or that black charring on the meat, and ideally try to avoid that. So if you put something like aluminum foil down, it will keep that from happening. All right, so plant-based diet. So you're like, okay, Hannah, this sounds really good, but how do I do it? That's probably the most common question that I get. So there's a couple different ways that we can do this, and it ends up looking a little bit different for everyone, but this is what I've found to be the most helpful when I'm trying to have people adapt to a plant-based diet, or even for myself, what do I have to, what's my takeaway when I'm trying to plan my meals as well too. So at breakfast time, we know breakfast foods can traditionally be pretty bland, right? There's not a lot of color on your plate. So we want to focus on adding more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains to our breakfast. That's where our opportunity is really at. So focusing on adding color and then eating whole fruit versus drinking juice. I cannot emphasize that enough. I would much rather you eat an orange than drink orange juice, because then you get the fiber and it also holds on to more antioxidants by eating it in its whole form. And we want to focus on less processed meats and less sugar sweetened foods. Okay. So see here on the left-hand side, you would have your typical bowl of like oatmeal or farina or something like that, and your bacon, eggs, and toast. To make it more plant-based, to make it more cancer fighting, we want to add color in, right? That is our goal. We want to add color. So this first one, this actual first photo here is savory oatmeal. And I make this pretty regularly on the weekends. It's kind of my clean out the fridge meal. So you just make your oatmeal like you typically would, but you, instead of adding water or milk, you're going to add chicken or vegetable stock, ideally a low sodium, but if you don't have that, that's okay. So you would add like a broth or a stock instead. And then you would saute some vegetables on the side, maybe scramble an egg up, maybe have some ground turkey that you can add to it. And then you just can keep building it from there. But it's a really good opportunity to get more vegetables into your breakfast meal. Or if you like the sweet oatmeal versus a savory oatmeal, you can just top it with fruits and maybe some nuts and seeds just to really help optimize those nutritious plant-based foods. And then say our standard avocado toast. This has really gained a lot of traction in the past few years, but dietitians love it. It's a great opportunity to get color, to get antioxidants, as well as to get some healthy, heart-healthy fats in through the avocado. So I typically just take one piece of toast. I'll put either a half or a third of an avocado on it, and then maybe even scramble an egg or have any type of egg on top as just a nice extra protein source to help keep you full longer. All right, so how to follow this at dinner. Dinner is always a little bit different. We typically have more food groups available, and we have more opportunity to be creative at lunches and dinners. So the rule that I like to follow with lunch and dinner is the plate method. On right here, as you can see, the green area, of course, is going to be our plant-based foods, right? So ideally 2/3 of your plate should be vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and beans. So those plant-based nutrient-dense foods. And then 1/3 of your plate or less can be your protein, okay? And if you choose to do animal proteins, this is the portion size that you wouldn't want to exceed for the most part. But if you're doing vegetarian protein sources, that can be a great opportunity to do some tofu, maybe some beans, some lentils. Those can be really wonderful options there. So as you can see here on the bottom, I have 3 different examples of meals that can be considered plant-based. And as I mentioned, it can be done in a lot of different ways. But the reason why I like this so much is because look at these meals. They are colorful. They look really nice because there's a lot of variety. There's texture, there's color. There's going to be a lot of different flavors at your meal. So you're going to end up being more satisfied with a meal like this versus something that's just some pasta with some meatballs or something like that. You know, you're not going to be as satisfied versus this has more variety. So this first one, you can see there's a little bit of some shrimp, like a salad. I think those might even be, that might be a pear. And then some quinoa or couscous. Here you have some salmon. And here you can see they didn't fill their entire plate for these, or actually for any of these with vegetables entirely. They do have some fruits in there too. And I always think that's really helpful, especially for our people that don't necessarily love vegetables. You know, they do okay, but they don't have as wide of a variety of vegetables that they like. You can put fruits in this as well too, okay? So here you can see they have like a mix of green vegetables, but then here they had an orange just to really help make sure they filled half the plate. So that's typically my rule, is just try and half your plate at least should be your fruits and your vegetables. Ideally more vegetables, but if you need fruits to fill that, absolutely go ahead and do that. And then how to do this at snacks. So we can't forget about snacks. Snacks are oftentimes a big component of people's diets. I eat at least 2 snacks a day, sometimes 3, depending on how things are going. But my snack rule, in order to optimize my cancer fighting foods, again, I want more fruits and vegetables. I want those phytochemicals. I want color. I want at least 1 fruit, vegetable, or whole grain at your snack. Is typically my rule. So you start there. So what do you have at home? Maybe you have a banana at home, and then you have some multigrain tortillas, and you're like, oh, okay, that works. So then let's put some peanut butter on there. There you go. You have a really nice snack option. Or you have grapes in your fridge and you're like, oh, I have some low-fat yogurt. I'm going to put some pecans on top, maybe some coconut flakes or something like that. There you go. You have a really nice snack option. And then maybe hummus with some vegetables, or this last one is like a nice multi-grain cracker with some, it looks like it's some tomatoes and a little bit of feta or a little bit of mozzarella. And the reason why I like this is because if you're pairing a fruit, a vegetable, or a whole grain with a fat or a protein, it's going to keep you more satisfied too. So if you were to just eat, say, a bag of baby carrots for a snack, you're going to probably be hungry in an hour, and then you're going to need another snack, and then just kind of continues to snowball from there. So by pairing your fruit or your vegetable with a fat or a protein, it's going to keep you full longer, because fat and protein takes longer to digest than just a fruit or a vegetable. So by pairing it with that, you're going to be more satisfied. It's going to keep you full longer. You're going to be less likely to keep snacking throughout the day. All right, recommendation number 4 is limit consumption of fast or processed foods. So this isn't probably surprising to anyone that we do know that fast food or foods that are low in nutrients, right? So we know our nutrients are vitamins or minerals or fiber or phytochemicals. Typically, fast food doesn't really have a lot of those. And those are your cancer fighters. Those are the foods that you want to try to get in your diet. So by eating foods that don't really have really high nutrient profiles, you're missing opportunity to get your cancer fighting foods in. Okay. So we do want to limit your intakes of fast or processed foods, but we understand that we're human, right? That times are going to come that you have to run through the drive-through. Say you're on a road trip and you really need to get some food. You didn't pack enough in the car and you have to run through a drive-through. My recommendation is, again, don't miss your opportunity to get your cancer fighting foods. Okay. Look for your opportunity to get fruits and vegetables into these takeout meals, at least to optimize your choices. So there is options to get fruits and vegetables at fast food restaurants or takeout joints, and use that opportunity. Get more fruits and vegetables and don't miss an opportunity to get those cancer fighting foods. All right. And so then with processed foods, another reason why they recommend limiting processed foods is because oftentimes they can be high in added sugar, especially if we're getting sweets and treats and those kind of things. So what I want to say is that sugar altogether isn't the worst thing in the world. I know a lot of times in the cancer world, people are terrified of sugar, all forms of sugar, and they can never have it in their diet. And that's not the case. Sugar is a lot more complex, and it's a lot different than just a hard, fast rule that you can never have it. Okay. There is a difference. There's added sugar and there's naturally occurring sugar. So as we know, white table sugar or added sugar, this is a sweet material. It's typically colorless, white, and it's added to foods and beverages to sweeten it. This is the type of sugar that we don't necessarily want in our diet. We don't want to sweeten our foods or beverages with sugar. We ideally want to be choosing it in its natural form. Okay, so again, this is added sugar. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about the negative side effects of sugar, okay, is this added sugar. And it's in a lot of foods in the American diet. So I'm not going to say that this isn't something that people come into contact with. We do all the time. So that's why I want to bring it up and just say added sugar is something we need to be conscious of. However, we know sugars are naturally found in fruit and dairy. Right? So we know that these foods naturally contain sugar as well too. I leave it to you if you choose to drink or eat dairy or not. That's very individual. I would say from a cancer standpoint, there's no association with dairy and cancer risk across the board. There are some certain cancers, but I do know kidney cancer doesn't necessarily have a strong association with dairy. But we know that things like fruits, yes, they naturally contain sugar, but they also naturally contain fiber, and they naturally contain phytochemicals, and they naturally contain a lot of really beneficial foods, a lot of really beneficial cancer-fighting foods in our diets, okay? So I don't want you to feel as though you have to avoid fruit because it naturally contains sugar, but I don't want you eating an entire bowl, like a giant bowl of fruit in one sitting. Again, I want you to pair it with different things just so you're not overdoing it at one time, but fruit is absolutely okay. I would say if you are someone that is, say, on dialysis or has to be careful with your potassium, then hopefully you're working with a dietitian to help you be aware of what fruits are higher in potassium. But that can be done at a later date with a dietitian. All right, so what is the sugar recommendation? All right, so added sugar is where this recommendation is referring to, okay? So less than 10% of our total calories should be coming from added sugar. And what does that end up actually looking like? You're like, Hannah, what's 10% of total calories? For an adult that typically comes out to 9 to 12 teaspoons a day, or 36 to 48 grams of added sugar a day. And you think about it, you look at that number, you're like, hey, that's a lot. Like, I couldn't imagine eating that much sugar in a day, but you would be amazed at how fast it actually adds up. I know 1 cup of yogurt, like I eat a Greek yogurt every single morning. I typically choose the coconut flavor just because I find it smoother and I like it. I like the flavor. 1 cup typically contains about 17 grams of added sugar. So there you go. I don't have a lot of opportunity to get more added sugar in the day. Or say I really want a cookie or I really want a bar of chocolate, then look at the label and see how much added sugar is in 1 serving, and then you subtract it from there. So it's in little things. I don't want you to feel like you have to have 0 grams of added sugar in a day, because even trying to hit 36 grams of added sugar a day is actually probably going to be a pretty good restriction for most people. So it's looking again at the added sugar, whether it's like coffee creamers or fancy pumpkin spice lattes right now, or, you know, with the holidays coming up, there's a lot of sweets and treats that we really love. I don't want you to feel as though you can never have one of those treats again, but you have to put it into, perspective. You know, if you really want a piece of pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, absolutely enjoy the pumpkin pie, but kind of recognize that that might be your added sugar recommendation for the day. You might have maybe a little bit extra from there, but you know, you just have to put it in perspective. You don't have to avoid it forever, but just be smart about when you are choosing to do your added sugar. All right, so going back, rule number 5, I've already talked about this before, but just kind of reiterating it, going through the full recommendations, is limiting our intakes of red or processed meats, okay? So as I mentioned before, they do recommend limiting your intakes of red meats, and again, that's beef, pork, and lamb. So we do recommend limiting your intakes of red meat and to 18 ounces a week if you choose to eat it. So that ends up coming out to 3 6-ounce servings, which ends up coming to be about the size of a deck of cards. As you can see, it's a pretty small piece of meat, but it is our recommendation of what to try to reach or what to try to limit to. Say if you're at a party and you really want a nice piece of sirloin that's like the size of your palm of your hand, it's like a good piece of steak and you really want to eat it, recognize that that's probably your red meat serving for the week. And recognize you probably did take opportunity for you to get some cancer fighting foods in your diet. So, you know, those type of behaviors, they do happen from time to time, but we don't want that to be the regular behavior that say you have just 1 big serving of red meat a week, because it does take the place of some good nutrient fighting or cancer fighting foods. Again, we want to avoid processed meats, given the strong association with colorectal cancer. I would say if you're having a cheese board, say you're having a very small get together or something like that, and you want to have a cheese board and the salami looks really good on there, what I would say is really focus on fiber for the next day or 2, just to make sure it's kicked out of your GI tract pretty quickly. Focus on lean, heart-healthy proteins, like I mentioned previously. Poultry, like chicken or turkey, just take the skin off. Fish and seafood like salmon, tilapia, shrimp, and light tuna. What I would say from a fish or a seafood perspective, a lot of people are nervous because of the mercury content. I would say focus on the smaller the fish, the less opportunity it has to be exposed to mercury. The bigger the fish, the larger time it's been in the water, the longer it's had to be exposed, likely it's going to have higher contents. Choose the smaller fishes. Say if you're getting salmon, choose a small cut. Light tuna in a can is the smaller tuna. But again, the smaller it is, the less mercury content it will have. And then, of course, plant-based proteins are encouraged and recommended, like nuts, beans, seeds, and lentils. I do recommend maybe trying to do 1 or 2 vegetarian meals a week if you're just getting started on this, and use these plant-based proteins in place of our traditional animal proteins, just to have honestly, just to have more recipes available and just to have a more varied diet. It's always a good thing to experiment with more foods. And I always recommend people try to experiment more with vegetarian meals, just because you might be really surprised. It might be your new favorite meal. All right, rule number 6, or recommendation number 6, is limit intakes of sugar sweetened beverages. Just because we know in the American diet that sugar sweetened beverages can consist of a large portion of calories for a lot of different people. And if we're trying to recommend maintaining a healthy weight and we're trying to recommend decreasing central adiposity, sugar sweetened beverages a lot of times are a contributing factor to difficulty losing weight. So I do want to recommend trying to limit intakes of sugar sweetened drinks, and when I'm meeting with someone for a weight loss visit, this is my first thing I recommend to someone. If I hear that they're drinking sugar sweetened beverages, is I want them to try to find a substitute. And sugar sweetened beverages are Juices I do count as the sugar sweetened beverages because a lot of our commercial juices on the market are the natural fruit juice, but a lot of times they sweeten it in addition. Of course, sodas or sweet teas or those different types of beverages all count towards that too, or our fancy coffee drinks count towards sugar sweetened beverages as well too. Ideally, we want to drink mostly water and unsweetened drinks. Fruit and herb infused water can be a really great way just to get different varieties, or even like sparkling water can be a really great way to get different flavored options. Unsweetened tea or black coffee are absolutely recommended as well too. They're actually really fantastic antioxidants, but of course you have to be careful with the quantity. If we get more than 3 glasses, typically that can cause a diuretic effect and you could become dehydrated. So ideally trying to keep your coffee and tea to less than 3 glasses at a time or per day. All right, so here's some different flavored water combinations I really like. I can try to make sure you guys get these slides afterwards so you can have these as a reference. But these can be a lot of different fun ways to flavor your water just to get something new and something exciting. All right, recommendation number 7 is limiting alcohol consumption. Just because alcohol intakes are associated with 8 or more different types of cancer. So typically it is recommended to not drink, but say if you choose to drink, for men, it's less than 2 drinks per day. And for women, it's less than 1 drink per day if you choose to drink. And what does that look like? So this is the serving sizes of different alcoholic beverages. So if you are drinking beer, it'd be 1 12-ounce beer. Say if you're drinking wine, it would be a 5-ounce glass, and so on and so forth. So just being careful with the portion size. You know, we could say I'm only having 1 a day, just like this giant glass of wine. So again, portion sizes do matter, especially when it's coming to alcohol consumption, and just making sure it's not too much if you choose to drink. All right, recommendation number 8, and this one is actually probably the recommendation I talk about I talk about it really often with patients, is not using supplements for cancer prevention. We want to focus on food first. We know that food and eating behaviors is the strongest association with decreased risk of cancer, or the recommendations that we've talked about so far are strongest link to decreased risk of cancer prevention. We have not found that when we're looking at supplements. We have not found that, say, taking a turmeric supplement or taking a garlic or a ginger supplement is associated with cancer prevention to the same level that food is. And it's likely because food is synergistic, right? If we eat this certain food, it's going to react in our body. It's going to have positive effects because of something else we ate in our diet. So for example, lycopene is a phytochemical found in tomatoes and is associated with decreased risk of prostate cancer. However, lycopene can only be absorbed by our bodies if it is taken along with fat. So it's a fat-soluble antioxidant. So if you are just eating raw tomatoes, you're not going to absorb the lycopene to the same level as you would, say, if you're making a tomato sauce, you have a little bit of olive oil in there, you're going to absorb it better. So if you were to take a lycopene supplement, it's not going to work the same, and it's not going to work in relation to your food. And we don't even know that, say, if you extract it from a food, if it even works at that point. So we do want to make sure that we're prioritizing food first, because food contains the natural substances that promote good health. And food also contains the fiber and the vitamins and the minerals and the phytochemicals that all work together to have the best benefit. But additionally, high dose supplements can impact actually risk of different types of cancers. There have been research studies previously, for example, that found that like high intakes of vitamin E were associated with increased risk of prostate cancer. So there are different high dose supplements that have actually been associated with increased risk of certain types of cancer. So we don't want to be using vitamins for cancer prevention. We want to be using foods for cancer prevention. And it also has been found to interfere with certain types of cancer treatments. So we do know that, say, I know this is a breast cancer treatment, but say doxorubicin is found to interfere with turmeric. So if an individual is getting a doxorubicin infusion and they were taking a turmeric supplement, that doxorubicin is not going to work as effectively because of the turmeric. So we don't want that to happen. We want our treatments to be effective, and we don't want anything to interfere with them. And then last but not least, this doesn't mean that you can never have a supplement in your entire life, because sometimes deficiencies do warrant supplementation. For example, vitamin D. We know that if we live in the Midwest, or we live actually anywhere in the United States that has cold weather, that we know that the risk of vitamin D deficiency is much higher because you're not outside in the winter months as much. So we do know that vitamin D deficiencies are pretty common, but if you have a vitamin and mineral deficiency, it will be brought up by your medical team and managed from there. And I like to just say that all natural does not mean harmless, okay? So just because a supplement is all natural or organic doesn't mean that it's not, could have any harm, okay? So I always want to say that because when I bring up this topic with people, but they're like, but it's all natural. But that doesn't mean that it's harmless, okay? Additionally, with supplements in the United States, the only time, say, the FDA has to intervene with a supplement is if there's been a negative report from the supplement. So supplements are not required to be tested. Supplements are not required to be verified. So the only time that there would be any type of verification is if the company does it itself or if there has been a negative press release or something in regards to a supplement product. And the FDA is not authorized to review them before they become to the market. So that again says it doesn't come without warning. You know, we have to be careful with our supplements. But say if you do have a vitamin and mineral deficiency and you need to start taking a supplement, what I would recommend looking for is a third-party quality assessment. Is I would want to look for one of these 3 symbols on the bottle of the supplement that you are planning to purchase. Specifically, the one that you can find the most common is this USP. And there used to be a lot of commercials, I would say probably like 5 to 10 years ago, with the Nature Made products that they would say USP verified. And that's actually really important because that means that that company went a step further to make sure that their product is actually what they claim it is. Okay, so they paid this third-party organization to test their product to prove that it is what they say it is. Okay, so these, if you are requiring a supplement, look for one of these 3 labels. All right, so again, I'm only going through the 8 of the 10 recommendations because the last 2 aren't necessarily related to nutrition or physical activity. It was about breastfeeding, and I can't recall the last one off the top of my head. But when you're looking up nutrition information or you're looking up information for vitamins and cancer, phytochemicals and cancer, nutrition and cancer, be careful of junk science because we know online there's so many different conflicting sources out there and you're like, I don't know what to believe because this says don't eat this and this says don't eat this. What do I believe? And here are some nice red flags that make you want to take a step back, okay? This first one is any recommendation that promises a quick fix or a cure-all in regards to nutrition and cancer, you need to be wary of that website. If there was a quick fix or a cure-all, my job would be much different right now, right? So unfortunately, food has not been associated with curing cancer at this point, but it can be a helpful tool to fuel your body and to give you the strength to withstand treatment or whatever ends up being your course. But unfortunately, food is not associated with curing cancer at this time. Again, my job would look a lot different if it was the case. Or claims that sound too good to be true. You're like, this sounds really good. I don't know what this, it's a very hard, strict recommendation that sounds too good to be true. Probably is. Extreme warnings of danger from a single food or a single diet pattern. Okay, so if you read something online like never eat bananas, it's gonna cause X, Y, and Z, maybe be a little cautious of the website because a specific food isn't necessarily associated with increased risk to cancer. As I mentioned, the only food that I typically recommend avoiding across the board is processed meats, but otherwise we don't really have that recommendation right now in the literature. Recommendations that are made to help sell a product. So we do know, maybe we have family members or we have friends that, maybe are selling some supplements or something like that. If they get a personal kickback from that product, maybe it might not be the best idea to start taking that product or something like that because they're going to sell it. They're going to push it in a way that's going to help get a profit to themselves. A list of good or bad foods. So, if you're looking at a list and it says blackberries are bad, but raspberries are good, maybe not trust that website that much. They might not be the most credible source. Bold marketing such as breakthrough, miracle, discovery, or the last one, information that your doctor doesn't even know. Most likely, if that were the case, that it was a really strong recommendation, maybe it might not be the best website to go to. But if you're reading something, you're like, I don't know, maybe it might be a junk science. It might be just a pretty bold claim, but I don't know what to think. Cross-reference it. So there's a lot of really credible websites out there that can cross-reference these claims to see if they are valid or not. Some really nice ones I recommend are like the American Cancer Society, the American Institute for Cancer Research, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. There's an oncology nutrition group in there that has a lot of really wonderful resources on there, or even the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. They have a fantastic website that's a lot of information about herbs and supplements and those kind of things. All right, so you're like, okay, I want to get going on maintaining or meeting these recommendations. I want to see where I'm at. Am I on board? Am I following these recommendations? The American Institute for Cancer Research has this I Thrive plan, which is a really nice platform that helps you recognize, am I meeting these recommendations right now? What do I need to do to get there? Where should I start? Is there any area I'm falling short in? And so you can put in your own information and it can come out with a nice plan for you. So I'll show you when I did my plan. I was just filling it out. I was just trying to be very honest with my recommendations. So this is kind of the takeaway they gave me. So again, I'm a dietitian and exercise specialist, and I didn't do as well as I thought I would on this report. So some things, and then what they'll do is they'll take your report and they'll come up with some different plans that they think that would be the most beneficial for you to get going in. Okay. So what I'm going to focus on is that they thought I had too high of intakes of, say, like added sugar and refined carbohydrates. I would say I really like my sweets and my treats. So it makes sense that they found that might be my area to start to focus in initially. So again, they take you through one day at a time, and they review, say, specifically like what foods are more of our processed carbohydrates or our added sugars. They'll give you examples of the foods and what can we do to help kind of shift this eating pattern to make it more nutritious each day. Again, they give you more information. They might start giving you some nice recipes. Again, they got more recipes on day 3. Day 4, more recipes, different strategies to kind of help work towards the recommendations. And then this last one, they gave me smart snack ideas. Okay. Additionally, on the American Institute for Cancer Research website, they have some really wonderful plant-based recipes. Again, some are vegetarian or vegan, some are do consist of animal proteins as well too. So healthy recipes on the American Institute for Cancer Research. Cook for Your Life is also a really fantastic recipe database that are all plant-based. This woman does do more vegetarian diets. And then the Cancer Dietitian as well too. She's a fantastic resource. And she also does like blogs about different hot topics in the world of cancer and nutrition. And she talks about different things and breaks down more science behind things. All right. Okay, guys. So that's what I had for you today. I saw that there are some questions coming through, I believe. Let me see if I can pull this up.
The first question we had was from Linda Anderson. She said a couple of people said they tuned in a couple minutes late. And so sorry if they missed it. But what are your feelings on sugar substitutes?
Yeah. So what I would say is a lot of times people think they think of aspartame, right? And that's like the first one that comes to their mind and they're terrified of it. I would say that the research with aspartame has actually been redone over the past few years. The initial study that actually came out suggesting that aspartame increases risk of cancer, that was done in the rat studies. The person that came out with that research is actually in prison now because he falsified the data. So I would say that there isn't a strong association at this time, but I leave it to you, right? So it's a personal choice. A lot of people don't necessarily like sugar substitutes. There are more natural sugar substitutes on the market now, like stevia or monk fruit. So say if you are looking for a sugar substitute, I would maybe start there. But again, I leave it to you. They are deemed safe, but it's.
Wow, I did not know that about the guy who had falsified that data.
Yeah.
Now, my daughter always smacks the aspartame out of my hand when I'm going to sweeten my unsweet tea. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Fun fact.
And then someone else said that, what is your thoughts on fasting? Since my cancer diagnosis and after both a prostatectomy and a nephrectomy, I personally fast about 16 hours daily. And I eat 0 sweets, no alcohol, no red or processed meats. But what are your thoughts on fasting?
So again, the fasting research at this time isn't very strong. We don't have a strong conclusion whether or not it's recommended or not. At the end of the day, fasting is the way I view it from my perspective as an oncology dietitian is it could limit your opportunity to miss out on some of your cancer fighting foods, right? But it really depends on what your goal is and the reason why you're doing that. From a cancer prevention standpoint, there's really not the evidence to support it at this time. But say if you're doing it for weight loss purposes or you're doing it for some other reason, maybe there is, but I won't give like a hard fast rule to anyone that says that I would require them to fast for cancer prevention. So, but it depends. If it works well for you, keep doing it. That's perfectly fine. And if more of these strict diet patterns end up working well for you, then that's fine. I'm not going to say that you have to stop them, but just know that those strict recommendations aren't necessarily required at this time. But if they work for you, then that's okay.
And then Deb asked, what kind of oils should we use? Some patients believe that seed oils are dangerous. Is there any evidence that we should avoid these?
Yeah, that one's a constant topic as well too. I would say the biggest thing when you're choosing your oils is recognizing what you're using your oils for. So with certain types of oils, they have lower smoking points. So that's the temperature that an oil can be used towards. So there are some, specifically like olive oil, shouldn't be used at high temperature cooking just because it has a lower smoking point. So that's what you want to look at, because once it hits its smoking point, the oil can kind of shift and it can kind of turn into more of like a pro-inflammatory oil, or it can have some more negative side effects once it hits its smoking point. So you just have to think of what the reason for you're using that oil is for. If you're just putting it like on salads or things like that, typically an oil is a mono or polyunsaturated fat that has certain health benefits, and they all have different compositions of mono and polyunsaturated fat or omega-3. So I wouldn't say any oil across the board has to be avoided, but I would just look to see what is the reason why you're using it. Are you sauteing? Are you cooking it at high temperatures? Then you need to choose an oil that can withstand that high temperature so it doesn't smoke during the process. Okay, does that make sense? I hope I answered that okay. There's no hard, fast rule right now with oils. So again, if you read online that like you can never have this kind of oil, then that might be kind of an exaggerated claim.
And then Deborah asked, for those taking TK1 drugs, are there any low fiber fruits, veggies that can be okay for when the cancer med is causing diarrhea to not completely eliminate good foods?
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely some treatments that can cause a little more loose stools and a little more sensitivity. So what I would say from a fruit and vegetable perspective, so kind of bear with me when I talk about this, it's kind of crazy, but it's the easiest way for me to think about it, is that you ideally want to limit any types of fruits or vegetables that are kind of scratchy, okay? So that when you eat that, the risk of it kind of scratching your GI tract as you go sometimes can cause a natural reaction in our body that causes this water shift that causes some loose stools, okay? So ideally you want to choose fruits and vegetables that are gentle and soft that aren't going to necessarily scratch. So if you can, take the skin off if you can. So say apple, for example, all the fibers in the skin. So just take the apple skin off. You can have a raw apple. Otherwise, do applesauce instead. Otherwise, let's choose some softer fruits like melons, mangoes, bananas. Those are all our softer fruits that are lower in that scratchy fiber. The scratchy kind of, again, comes with the skins and the seeds. So think about it, like a kiwi has those little tiny seeds in it. It's probably going to scratch. It's probably going to worsen the diarrhea a little bit. And as well as berries. Berries have those little tiny seeds in them. Even if you blend them up, they could kind of cause some loose stools. And then with vegetables, for the most part, if you can, just cook them. That's going to probably be the safest bet for you right now. If you can cook your vegetables, it breaks down the fiber. It's easier to digest. But say if honestly you're having a really hard time with diarrhea, you're having a hard time getting fruits and vegetables, then you can always blend things, right? So you can always make fruit smoothies or vegetable smoothies. I would recommend doing them in the blender because then you get to keep the fiber. It just breaks it down so it's easier to digest. And ideally don't blend anything with little seeds in it like the berries, just because the seeds aren't going to get blended. So that's kind of what I would focus on is cooked vegetables. And then with fruits, if you can take the skin off or if you can avoid the seeds, that's kind of the biggest thing to focus on.
And what about the benefits of turmeric?
Yeah. So turmeric, what I recommend, again, kind of going back to the vitamins and the minerals, is I'd rather you use it more in your cooking if you can. So ideally using it as like a natural herb versus taking it as a supplement. It has been found to interfere with a lot of different medications. So maybe your treatment might not interfere with turmeric, but if you're on, say, like a blood thinner, or if you're on any anticoagulants, it has been found to interfere with those, make them less effective. If you're on, like, say if you're on warfarin, for example, and you're having a hard time getting your labs within a normal range and you're taking turmeric, It's probably because of that. So I would recommend just using it in your foods more, getting creative with your recipes. And so that would be turmeric, cinnamon, garlic, ginger, all of those. I'd recommend just using in your foods rather than taking a supplement.
And then what are your thoughts on daily condensed powdered fruit and vegetable substitutes?
So again, it's a supplement. We don't know what it is. We can't guarantee that it's actually the fruit and the vegetable that they claim it is on the label, right? Since supplements aren't regulated. I would recommend just trying to eat a high fruit and vegetable diet at the end of the day, because that's where the research is. It has the fiber, it has the antioxidants. Once it gets into its powdered form, who knows if even the antioxidants are active at that point? You know, based on the processing method, it could completely inactivate some of the antioxidants and the vitamins in the fruits and vegetables in the first place. So then you're just kind of adding like a green powder to your food. It might not even be effective. So we can't prove that that is actually what it claims it is. So I'd rather you focus on fruit and vegetables first and foremost.
Well, I think that's all of our questions. But man, I learned a lot. Thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us today.
Yeah,
of course. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to chat them out here. And we'd love it if you'd like to share your slides. If you could send your slides to me, I'll make sure when the video is posted that we have the slides right next to it.
Perfect. That sounds great. I'd be happy to share them. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer any. But again, you know, if you have a pretty specific like medical history, I recommend just going to your team and most cancer centers have a dietitian. So I'd recommend asking for one if you don't know if you don't know who they are, just because they're going to have a better idea what your specific medical treatment and your history is. Okay. But thanks everybody. I really enjoyed doing this.
Thank you, Hannah. We really enjoyed it as well. You have a great day.
Yeah, you guys too. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.